Good evening, class. I'm going to spend just a few minutes going over a few notes I made for your midterm. So probably shouldn't take too long to go through this, but just run by a few concepts that um, maybe you need to at least kind of focus on, at least understand before you go into midterm. And we've talked, I don't say ad nauseum about resources and managing resources and, business level strategies. And at some point, I think, Selznick even talks about, the capabilities and resources to capabilities. When we're talking about resource-based theory, resources need to be valuable, they need to be rare, they need to be difficult to imitate, they need to be non-substitutable. And if they've got all four of those, they're going to have, most companies will have long run success. If you don't have all four of them, it's probably in the short run you may do okay, but I'm not sure that it sets a company up really well for long run success. So again, remember in resource-based theory, you've got the resources need to be valuable, rare, difficult to imitate, and non-substitutable. And then we talked about that the authors talked for a few minutes about resources between tangible and intangible. Tangible is something you reach out and touch. You can feel it, you can see it. Intangible is more like intellectual resources, resources you can't really reach out and touch. When we're talking about intellectual properties, for the most part, valuable, rare, non-substitutable. So intellectual properties, again, valuable, rare, non-substitutable. Resource-based theory, valuable, rare, difficult to imitate, non-substitutable. So see, we're missing one, and you're missing one really because of intellectual properties. You've got some parameters in place that somewhat protect you. You've got patents, which is kind of the legal aspect of it. You've got trademarks, and you look for that little R with the circle on it. You've got copyrights, which, it's a C with a little circle on it. And then you've got kind of trade secrets. So it's intellectual property to some extent, either legal means or non-legal means. There are ways to protect a company so that the intellectual property is not easy to imitate. So that's why there's four on the resource-based theory, and there's only three on the intellectual properties. Let's see what else. And we talked about supply chain. We talked about value chain in the text. And value chain is a tool which charts the path by which products or services are created and sold to customers. And remember, the authors talked about there's two types of activities when you're talking about value chain. You've got the primary activity, you got secondary activity. Primary activities, it's like inputs, outputs, production process, sales, those types of activities. And then when you're talking about the support activities or the kind of the secondary activities, they're like HR, IT, those type activities. So when it comes to value chain, you've got the primary activity or you've got the secondary or support activity. And then we went through several things in that chapter, and down toward the end, they brought up SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And SWOTs is, I've probably used that in every company I've ever worked for. Could be something under different names, but the same concept on just about every company I've ever worked for. And the thing that I've always said is, don't get hung up in the results. I won't say don't take it too seriously, because it is a great idea sharing, brainstorming, get people to think outside the box, be creative. Does a really good job from that aspect, but just don't get too caught up in the results of it. See what else we've got here. Um, and at that point, the authors get into generic strategy, and it's a general way of positioning a company's business level strategy within an industry. And we go back to Michael Porter, our friend from Harvard Business School, and he talks about the competitive dimensions. There's the sources of competitive advantage, and then the scope of operations. And then at that point, the authors start diving into Michael Porter's concepts. And if you go back to page 151, that's a little 2x2 that I talk about, and it talks about the scope of operations. You've got cost leadership. And so in the scope of operations, he talks about the four generic business level strategies. So, and the first one is, and remember that little box, the first one is cost leadership, and that's going to pop up as Walmart in the example. And it's acceptable quality, it's low price, it's a broad market base. And then if you look at the little box that says differentiation, I think he's got plugged in Nordstrom. And so when you're talking about differentiation, you're talking about unique products, you're talking about convincing consumers to pay a higher price because of your uniqueness of the products that you sell. And at least on the differentiation, it's still focusing on a broad market. And then you drop down to focused cost leadership, and that's going to pop up. I think he pops up there with Dollar General store, and it's again low price, acceptable quality, but it's a really targeted market base. And if you've ever been into a Walmart, which I'm assuming most have, if you've ever been into a Dollar General store, which I don't know whether most have, there's a significant difference between the two stores, and it's because the concepts, the marketing concepts, or the business level strategies they have, they're just talking about Walmart, a broad market, and Dollar General, a narrow market. And then the last one, you're talking about focus differentiation, and that's that anthropology. And it's a unique product, it's a higher price, higher quality, but it's a targeted market. And if you compare that store with Nordstrom, if you've ever been in both of them, I've been in Nordstrom, I haven't been in Anthropology, but there's a significant difference in the breadth of services they provide or the breadth of products that they sell. And so you can tell there's a difference between the broad market and the targeted market. And when we're talking about cost leaders, they are focused cost leaders, whether it's focused cost leadership or just plain cost leadership. Again, they're similar in that they focus on efficiency. They are based on efficiency. And that's where the authors start getting into economies of scale. And that's when a company's long run average cost decrease over time because they are providing more units of a product. And the reason it decreases over time is the more units you have, the more you can spread that fixed cost over a larger number of units. And it's going to give you a long run average cost curve that's going to be sloping down. And that's one thing that you'll see a lot within these cost leadership when you're looking at that little 2x2 table. If you look at the left-hand column over here with the 2x2, you're going to have Walmart and you're going to have Dollar General store. What else we got? And then the authors just kind of seemed like I'm a little disjointed, but I'm trying to get to my notes and make sure I at least cover some of the basics that you need to understand. And within this market economy that we have today, you're going to have price sensitivity that can definitely impact some of these business level strategies that focus on differentiation, because it's an issue for differentiation and focus differentiation, because at some point, if the economy gets deteriorates enough, especially with inflation, the way it's damaging the real wage rate that we're all receiving, we can shift into that price sensitivity mode and start looking at more of the Dollar General stores and the Walmarts, because we're willing to, I don't want to say downgrade our desire for quality, but at some point the price sensitivity takes over and price becomes the main driver for us as consumers. The authors also talk about a best cost strategy, and it's charge relatively low prices and offer substantial differentiation, and that is the best of all of these strategies. And if a company can do it, they're going to be usually very successful. It's the downside of it is just on a best cost strategy. You've got a lot of companies that can't do it. Costco comes to mind, Southwest comes to mind. They do a reasonably good job at lowering the prices and substantial differentiation. And then we get into I think it was chapter 6, and we're talking about competitive moves. And remember, the competitive moves, you got the first mover, and that's when you jump into the market to try to establish a potential competitive advantage. You've got disruptive innovation was one of them. You've got footholds like IKEA, where they establish that store and then spread out from that. You've got the blue ocean strategy that works well for some. Then you've got bricolage, which is where they're taking multiple concepts in a market and pulling them together to create either new markets or pulling them and combining them to create new products. So make sure you go back and you review your information on competitive moves. And then there was a part in the chapter on chapter 6 talking about responding to rivals' moves. So you've got the competitive moves, which you're trying to, as a leader, ensure that your company is competitive. And then you've got to, as a leader, be ready to respond to rivals' moves. And if you remember, we went through that. There was speed of response, there was multi-point competition, mutual forbearance, you had disruptive innovation, and again, you had the fighting brands, which to me, fighting brands is kind of a unique concept, and one that I've I guess noticed over the years, and then especially working in the grocery store when I was in graduate school, you saw it a lot with the fighting brands. Let's see. And then lastly, to kind of focus on some information, I think, go back and then review the information you had about cooperative moves. You had joint ventures, you had strategic alliances. And remember, what was the difference between joint ventures and strategic alliances? Joint ventures, two or more companies come together and they create a new entity. Strategic alliance, two or more companies come together and they don't create a new or unique entity. You had co-location, you had co-opetition, which to me it's a unique concept. I've never actually heard that terminology till I read it in this textbook. And then lastly, the authors talk about get moving. So if you think about the review, most of your midterm for the most part is going to be coming from chapters 4, 5, and 6. So hope that review helps, and don't forget, watch the video before you take your midterm, and hopefully everything works out well for you. Talk to you later.